and welcome once again to Karen's Colours. I'm Dr. Karen, and these are my conversations in colour. I'd like to thank all of those of you who've been watching my videos. I hope they've been enlightening and perhaps a little entertaining as well. If you're new to the channel, then I'd like to make you doubly welcome. This channel is all about presenting colour as a way of understanding psychological, spiritual, emotional, and sometimes even physical contexts in which people find themselves. Last week, we looked at the colour orange, and orange as a strength was the colour that was associated with survival. Its biggest challenge for most people who choose orange was the colour cyan. But cyan also can be chosen as a strength, and that's what we're going to look at today. Cyan we've met before. It is a colour that is associated with trust, with feeling wonderful because everything's going your way, and also the colour of peace and harmony and making sure there is nothing in your world that could possibly go astray. As a challenge we met last week, we understood that this sort of peace and harmony can in fact become boredom, friendlessness, the inability to trust or be trusted. But as a strength, it is a wonderful colour to choose. Most people, as we already know, and in fact I will leave the link to that video below, choose the colour blue as their signifier for their greatest strengths. But there are many people who don't like blue as such, but prefer the paler version cyan. And remember that cyan has that little tinge of green in it, and that green has to do with values. Just like blue has to do with communication, cyan has to do with communication of values. And so the people who choose this are often people who are very trusting, almost to a fault, but they also are very trustworthy. We find that the people who choose cyan as their strength are able to elicit trust from others. People want to be their friends, and they have many, many friends. They have so many friends that they really have a great deal of trouble differentiating out which are the good friends, the true friends, from those that are simply fair weather friends. But they attract all sorts. As a strength, we also find that being the same colour top and bottom in the yin-yang symbol means that they not only have this need for that ability to create friendships wherever they go, but they also want to be in a state of constant calm. In the real world, that's exactly what they achieve. They are calm. They are peaceful. They are able to feel as though nothing could possibly ever go wrong. And the interesting thing of the people who choose these, they're often new brides, just before the wedding generally. Of the number of people I have done readings on who've chosen this cyan as their strength, a great proportion of them have been brides. These are the ladies who are absolutely in a state of bliss. They've found their soulmate. They're now about to walk down the aisle to join themselves with that soulmate for a lifetime, and they are dedicated to ensuring that that particular relationship will last. And quite often it appears to do so for very, very many decades. As a strength, cyan is often a colour attractive to women, not so much men. Men will prefer the darker blue. At least that's been my experience. But as cyan is the colour of relationships, the colour of peace and harmony and bliss, it's the one that women will aspire to. Men, on the other hand, may be attracted to such women, but they themselves don't choose the relationship side. They don't choose the bliss side. They're far more likely to want the order and the convenience of having everything in its place the way it should be that blue gives them. So there is a difference, only a subtle one, but a difference between cyan and blue. But as a strength, it also has its issues. And in this case, cyan has two issues of major importance. Both of them appear approximately the same number of times, so it's a fairly equally divided decision that is made by people who have cyan as their strength in order to detail those things that they have difficulty with. And the two colours, and once again, they are solid colours, top and bottom the same, are green and pink. Now, green we've met before. We met it when we were talking about red, and we met it briefly when we were talking about blue. Cyan and green are on the same side of the colour wheel. And even though cyan has that little touch of green in it that allows it to speak its values, it does have problems with green as such. So what does this entail? Looking firstly at the green, top and bottom are the same colours. So the person who has cyan as their strength has real difficulty in being able to manage change. And the sort of change are the everything's nicer on the other side of the fence, that sort of green pastures appeal. The green internally as a driver forces people to begin in different directions, to start again, to let go of the past and to begin in a new direction. Cyan people don't like to do that. And why not? Mainly because the cyan asks for peace and harmony in the here and now, and green asks for a discernment, a change of values, an alternative that may be beckoning for them to move in a different direction. And that drive inside is very, very difficult for a cyan person to deal with. In the real world, when they are actually forced to take on a new beginning somewhere, then that green in the real world creates the sort of chaos that comes from not knowing exactly what it is that is going to happen in the future. Green on green may be a fortunate thing that can happen. In fact, if we look at the ideas of what does green entail, well, it's new growth, it's plants heading in all directions, but you're never quite sure when something actually erupts out of the soil, just what sort of a plant it is going to be, unless, of course, you're a plant specialist. But most people don't know where a new start is going to take them. And this is the one thing that the person who likes cyan as their strength has difficulty with. Is this new change, is this new challenge going to be beneficial? Is it going to be detrimental? So the green as a challenge for a cyan person completely uproots them, makes them feel incredibly uncomfortable as to where they are heading. If we examine the crossing over of cyan and green, like with all of the other instances where a strength and an obstacle are linked together in the same activity, these things tend to cause failure. Cyan in the real world is that ability to create harmony and peace and connection in the real world. But when we have green underneath, the thing that is driving that is a change in values. It's heading off in a different direction. So when you're heading in a different direction, but you're trying to maintain calm on top, you're very much like that duck swimming in the pond, looking very unruffled in the real world, and the legs are going hell for leather, trying to keep up with the current. The current is the green. It's the change. It's the moving in a direction where you really don't know what the outcome's going to be. The calm on top is a facade. And as a facade, it is not able to be maintained for any length of time. Sooner or later, that duck has to either take off into the air and fly away, or else it might just be snapped up by a passing crocodile. You never know. On the other hand, if those colours were reversed and we have green in the real world and cyan in the internal world, that cyan need for peace and harmony and connection will produce in the real world that change. It actually forces that change. It creates an alternative to what already exists. Now, how does it do that? Well, it does that as a response to something that occurs in the environment. Quite often, the green on cyan suggests that the person is now stuck in a situation where they are forced into doing something different or being in some place different, something that is pretty much the unknown. Not unknown insofar as totally a novel experience that you've never had before, but there has been a massive change, and that change has forced the cyan person to now try and adjust to it, and they don't adjust well. Their primary drive is for peace and harmony, but you can't have peace and harmony and connection as long as there are changes underway. Because as soon as one change occurs and you adjust to it, another change is on the way and you need to adjust again. And they may be in completely different directions, so competing with one another. So this is why cyan and green as obstacles and strengths do not bode well for each other. On the other end of the spectrum, we find pink. Now, green's actual opposite is red, but pink is that paler version of red that causes a whole change in a person's ability to maintain dominance in the world. Pink is the color of babies. Specifically, in our Western culture, it is girl babies, not boy babies. But that's irrelevant in the scheme of colors. Pink on pink, as with all colors that have the same color top and bottom, denotes a rigidity. And here the rigidity is one of not only behavior, but also of need. An infant needs everything but can manage nothing for itself. Pink in the internal world is an awareness of what I want for myself, but in the real world, pink does not allow me to do anything about it. If an infant is crying, it is dependent upon somebody else to come and comfort it or feed it or change it or do whatever else it needs in order to make it feel satisfied. If whatever it receives is not what makes it feel better, then the child will continue to cry. And so it is also with the adult who chooses pink as the obstacle. They never seem to be able to get what they want to satisfy themselves. And so there is a real problem here in being able to take charge of themselves. Unlike red, where the person is able to say, I want and I will have, pink simply says, I will take whatever is offered. Now, for someone who is cyan, who is used to creating peace and harmony and connection in their lives, being out of their depth as pink creates for them, not able to create connections because the connections come to them whether they like it or not, and whether they are positive or negative connections doesn't make any difference. Those connections are outside the scope of control that a person who is cyan is able to manage. So having this lack of control about what it is that comes at you, there is also an inability to control how you respond to it. A pink person as an obstacle does not necessarily like themselves very much. They can't say no, they can't say yes. They simply have to accept whatever is thrown in their direction. And this vulnerability is something that puts a cyan person very much ill at ease. It's not quite the same sort of problem that a cyan person would have with the green, because green is a change that is recognized. And yes, I know that that's a change, and whether I like it or not, I will have to adjust to it. A person who has pink as their obstacle has a real problem in even being able to recognize what a change is. Things happen to a pink personality, and whether or not they like it, they have no control whatsoever about how they will respond to it. The things outside of themselves happen to them, and all they can do is accept. Now, when we shift the pink and cyan around so that they meet each other as a single entity, when cyan occurs in the real world, once again, we have that ability to connect with other people, the ability to create peace and harmony and maintain that blissful state that we want to have in the real world. The pink internally, however, means that it doesn't matter what it is that we are doing in the real world, there is never any satisfaction. The baby doesn't really know why their tummy is sore. They just know that there is a soreness. If we reverse those colors now, and we have pink in the real world and cyan in the internal world, but this time the cyan in the internal world means the person is seeking for that luxurious ability to just simply feel comfortable. In the real world, however, things are happening to them, and those things are things out of their control. They cannot stop them. They cannot go along with them. They simply have to adjust to whatever occurs in the real world. This sort of person often spends a lot of time complaining about how uncomfortable they are. Inside, there is the drive for comfort, but externally, there is no comfort. And so this person has a real difficulty in being able to create the sort of peace and harmony that they're looking for. The connection side of the cyan, which is also a very deep need internally, simply doesn't translate into any ability to create specific sorts of friendships. Once again, the pink in the real world prevents the person from being able to take charge. They cannot pick and choose. They simply have to accept whatever it is that's thrown at them. They can't say no, they can't say yes. And as such, that person is unable to make the sorts of connections that the cyan internally really craves. So that's it in terms of this week's colours. Cyan as a strength, and its most commonly chosen obstacles, green and pink. There is a combination, of course, here that we haven't talked about, and that is the green and pink together. But we'll save that for another day. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this sort of information that I'm presenting here and you like these videos, please hit that little like button, maybe even subscribe, but certainly come back for the next one. You never know what it is that I'm going to be presenting next. I'll catch you next week. Bye.